This is a Rattle and Hump Sports podcast for Tuesday, October the 1st, 2013, and with us right now, I guess, as we perform a funeral service for the Texas Rangers, whose season came to a pretty quiet end last night against Tampa Bay. With us is Dic Humphrey from Rattle and Hump Sports. How you doing, Dic?
I'm fine. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on. Let's first of all talk about that game, the play-in game, the 163rd regular season game. The Rangers went out meekly against Tampa Bay. What did you make of the performance last night?
Well, I got to say, hats off to David Price. I think he was really the story. I mean, the Rays had been like the Rangers, needing to win essentially every game this last week, and they won 8 of the last 10 to end up in this tie for the second wild card spot. And they've been knocked around a little bit over the weekend in Toronto, particularly Sunday. They got a 7-0 lead and barely hung on to win 7-6. So they had a tired bullpen, and David Price gave them 9 innings, a complete game, and certainly he wasn't just great the first 3 innings, but he seemed to right the ship after that, and finished extremely strong, retiring 12 of the last 13 batters after the Rangers scored their final run of the game. And he was helped. The Rangers were generous to him in the first 3 innings when they gave him 2 outs on the bases, so he only had to come up with 7 on his own. But he was really the overall story of the game. He was just good. And Evan Longoria was the offensive player of the game. He had 3 hits, including a homer, drove in 2 and scored 2. So a good player, and they're both good players, and they played well when it counted.
Were you at all surprised that David Price came out to pitch the 9th inning last night?
Not at all, especially with their bullpen being in somewhat shambles, and Madden will often do things more by a feel rather than from a procedure, and he's not just an automatic bring in the closer when you got a 9th inning save situation. And you know, he said afterward he talked to Price, and Price felt strong and certainly looked strong to him, and the pitch count was good. He only finished with 118 pitches, so that's certainly a reasonable number for a pitcher to throw in a game.
And conversely, you got the Rangers last night, who made the decision to start Martin Perez, the rookie, in the biggest game of the year, and he gave up 3 runs in the first 3 innings. But how did you think he pitched overall?
Well, they really didn't have much choice. I mean, they had scrambled and had to win all 7 games last week to get this tie, and there was no skipping starts or anything. It was Perez's turn to pitch, so he was the one they had. And I think he did fine. I mean, obviously got hit a little bit in the first inning, got helped tremendously on a Craig Gentry throwing out the leadoff hitter, trying to stretch a single into a double, and got away with giving up just 1 run in the first, with giving up 3 hits and a walk. So he was a little bit fortunate there, but he settled down. I think he pitched well, and I was mildly surprised that Washington took him out when he did. I thought he'd gotten stronger, but not criticizing Washington. With the expanded rosters, he certainly had plenty of arms in that bullpen, and we might as well bring in some rested guy and show a change of pace to the Rays.
The other big story of the night last night, the return of all-star slugger Nelson Cruz from his 50-game drug suspension. He was going to be the big bat in the lineup, but was it just a situation, he went 0 for 4 in the game, was it just a situation of just being out for too long and not being ready for a guy like Price last night?
Well, he certainly wasn't the only Ranger player that took an offer for the night. He only had 1 strikeout. He did make contact with 3 of the 4 at-bats, and 1 was a line-out. So I think overall he did fine. Obviously, playing instructional league games in Arizona, he wasn't going to have major league quality competition to try to get his timing back. But under the circumstances, he was undoubtedly a good choice. And from especially what we've seen of David Murphy and all season long, it was fine with me and fine with a lot of people to see Nelson Cruz have a shot at it.
Well, you mentioned earlier in the ball game probably two of the biggest factors in the loss last night, some base running problems with Elvis Andrus and Ian Kinsler being picked off, and I've heard several people saying today that it's just inexcusable for that to happen in a game of that magnitude. What do you think?
Well, there's no question. These are mistakes that if they were rookies, people said, well, they're rookie mistakes. Well, these aren't rookies, and they shouldn't be making those mistakes. And the outs on the bases was around 110 for the season, which is just an atrocious total. And a big part of the problem is Washington, because he doesn't see it as a problem. Whenever this has come up, he said he wants his guys to be aggressive, and aggressive is one thing, but stupid is another. And then these guys are often making stupid base running mistakes to run into these outs, and it certainly bit them last night. I mean, you score a couple runs earlier, and then maybe you chase Price, and the whole complexion of the game changes. So it's been a problem all year long, and like I say, Washington doesn't view it as a problem, so nobody's doing much about it.
Well, now that the season is over, you can start looking ahead and seeing what the future holds for the Rangers. I mean, basically, is the difference between this team and a team like Tampa the fact that Tampa had a David Price and an Evan Longoria, and the Rangers just don't have two players like that?
Well, obviously, offensively, the Rangers don't have a player like Longoria. Probably Adrian Beltre is the closest that they've got, and Beltre was. It looked to me like he's been playing the last week on one leg with that hamstring situation that's been lingering for most of the season. But they obviously miss the presence of a bat like Josh Hamilton that they've had for the last 5 years. I think he won one MVP award and was a consideration at least a couple other years. It's hard to measure what a guy like that does. It changes the pitches to other batters around him, makes other batters better, and it just makes the whole lineup better. And that's certainly it was the least runs the Rangers have scored in a full season since they moved into the ballpark. And offense was a big problem from the get-go, and it never got a whole lot better.
Do you believe that the Rangers, although they had overall a really nice year from their pitchers, do you believe they have a big game pitcher on their staff to rival David Price?
Probably not at this point in time. You look at Yu Darvish, and he can be so dominating, and yet he was certainly disappointing in the area you're talking about. It just didn't seem like he took charge and really looked in command late in the season out there, even when he pitched well. And maybe Matt Harrison, if he comes back, is somewhat of that type of pitcher, but I'm not sure that type of pitcher is completely necessary. I mean, probably the best team in the last 4 years, the one that certainly did the most damage in the season, was the 2011 team that got to within one strike of winning the World Series twice. And C.J. Wilson was the lead pitcher on that team, and he's certainly no ace like David Price. So a collection of just some good pitchers can be just as good a formula, but it's certainly easier if you have a big hoss like David Price to lead the way.
So when you look back at the 2013 season, is this a ball club that maxed out all that it had, or was it a disappointing team? Where do you stand on this?
I think they pretty well maxed out all they had. I mean, this team, the window of opportunity for the team that went to the World Series twice closed last year when Michael Young, Josh Hamilton, Mike Napoli, they've all left, and that's a lot of offense right there. Anybody that was the catchers on those teams are gone. So this team's in transition. They signed 1-year contracts to Brzezinski, to Berkman. They had Soto and Cruz and David Murphy looking at free agency. That effectively now Joe Nathan can be a free agent with this mutual option that he's earned by virtue of finishing 55 games this year. So it's still a team that looks like it's going to be in transition even further for next year. And there's a lot of things get settled, but there certainly is a pretty nice base to start with to build from to be a competitive team that can win a World Series.
When you mention that base, let's talk first of all about the people who the Rangers have to consider re-signing and bringing back. The top of that list, Nelson Cruz.
I hope they do. I mean, the power hitters don't grow on trees, and especially in this post-steroid era. He would have had more than 30 home runs without the suspension, and there's not a whole lot of 30 home run hitters anymore. He's certainly not the defensive player that he once was. He has a great arm still, but there's pretty much a vacancy of designated hitter with this team too. So I think he would be a great addition to this team. And one other factor that you're seeing is so many teams are locking up their younger players, and they don't hit free agency, much like the Rangers have done with Kinsler and now with Elvis Andrus this year. And quality hitters like Nelson Cruz are not hitting the free agent market in the numbers that they once did. So I think he would be a very valuable addition if they can get him back next year.
What do you think about the Rangers try to bring Joe Nathan back next year?
You know, at his age, I think you have to scratch your head. He's looking for a 2-year deal. I suspect there's probably some team that'll give it to him. The Rangers have Sheppers. The Rangers have Neftali Feliz back. They have Joaquin Soria. So they have some options at closer. And I'm not sure they're going to be wise spending a lot of money trying to Joe Nathan for 2 years.
Okay. Another guy who's a very popular player, but boy, was really disappointing this year would be David Murphy. What do they do about him?
I suspect that he's gone. I don't see where he just looked awful, and it just never seemed to get better. And I don't know whether the hitting coach's fault, or whether it was his fault, whether the pressure of playing out his contract and looking for a contract year and putting pressure on himself to produce some individual numbers or what. But I would doubt that he even gets a contract with as much money as he made this year as a free agent this winter.
All right, and then we look at some of the other guys. Lance Berkman's not coming back. There's no chance of that, right?
No, I'm not sure he even really wanted to come back this year. But they stuck enough money out there that he couldn't afford to say no.
All right, and then what about Przinsky?
You know, it's the one area of the team that's been disappointing to, I think, a lot of people that follow the team is that over this run they haven't been able to come up with any type of long-term solution at catcher. The name that will be out there as a free agent is Bryan. The Braves have a younger catcher that they likely will go with and probably won't make a competitive offer to keep McCann. And he is a really premier type catcher. So obviously the Rangers are going to be in on him. If they land him, I certainly don't see Przinsky coming back. Perhaps Soto as a backup. It would be nice to have some continuity. But if they don't land McCann, then maybe they look at Przinsky for another 1-year deal. But you got to think that AJ is going to be looking for a situation where he can be the starting catcher, and he's still got enough fuel in that tank to probably command that situation.
What about Matt Garza?
You know, that's an interesting one. I mean, this guy has essentially been a 500 pitcher over his career, which is getting close to 200 starts now. And you got to say he's probably pretty much a 500 pitcher. When he's good, he just looks so good, and it's so tantalizing that he could be a top of the rotation ace type. But certainly Rangers didn't see a whole lot of that type of pitcher after they traded for him in July. And the Rangers have a pretty good-looking rotation coming back. I'm not sure who else is going to be out there in free agency, or who might be available in a trade, but I think the Rangers are going to be looking for at least one pretty darn good pitcher to add to this rotation, and it may or may not be Garza.
How hard do the Rangers work to try to find a way to get Jerks and Profar on the field every day?
Boy, that is a really good question. I mean, the kid was obviously rushed to the majors this year. He certainly didn't explode like Bryce Harper or Mike Trout that we've seen in the past couple of years that were thought to be perhaps the top prospect in minor league baseball. He was overmatched at the plate and somewhat inconsistent in the field, though. Unlike when the Rangers brought up Elvis, and they just named him the shortstop, and he played shortstop every day. Profar's played second, third, DH, played short. They even tried him at left field, and he was learning new positions, and he certainly shows some really good instincts. And you have to think if a team put him at one position, probably shortstop, full time, he would be a really good player, and he will develop into a really good player.
Do the Rangers automatically get Rios back?
Rios, yes, he's got another year on his contract.
Okay, good. All right, so that's one they don't.
He's back, and there is a club option for 15 too.
Okay,
he's
good.
a bit expensive, so Rios will be back.
All right. Now, the other big question then, based on all of these things we've talked about, what about Ron Washington? I mean, what's his status for next year, you think?
Well, I got to think that based on what he's done, he certainly doesn't deserve to be fired. I mean, I think for the talent that he had, and especially when you look at the injury situation, he ended up with probably a fourth of the game started by three rookie pitchers. Tepesh, Grimm, and Perez, and they won 20 games. He had, he expected Colby Lewis and Matt Harrison to be a big part of his rotation, and got a total of 2 starts, and they lost both those games out of those 2 guys. So there were, the Cruz suspension for 50 games, and Brzezinski was on the disabled list. Ogando was on it 3 times. I think this team did probably as good as the talent base could have done, and maybe better. So I don't know that he deserves to be fired on that or his body of work. Certainly he's taken this situation to the World Series twice in his 7 years, and nobody else got more than 1 win total in the history of the team before he got here. Having said that, I think you really need to look at this team's in this state of transition, and as it goes forward, is he the right man to manage the team? Is his message wearing out? Has he been here perhaps too long? You certainly see some situations like that in sports where a leader stays too long, and not that they're not good at it, then they get in a different situation and they usually are very effective again. But Andy Reid with the Philadelphia Eagles was a good example of that. Look at the marvelous job he's doing in Kansas City. And I'm not so sure Mike Scioscia isn't in that situation with the Angels, too. But anyway, I think that's the real question here with Washington. Is he the right guy as you move forward with this team to manage it?
Okay. And as they try to sort that out, the bottom line is it looks like the priority in the offseason is going to be trying to find some source that can bring some more runs to this ball club, because ultimately that was what did them in, was the lack of runs they were scoring.
No question. I think you've got a base of pitching here, both in the bullpen and with the starters. I mean, Perez and Holland and Matt Harrison's back, and Ogando and Darvish for starters, that's not a terrible rotation, and my guess is there will be somebody that gets added to that group that's a pretty good starter. But obviously, yes, they scored the fewest runs they've ever scored in a full season, and since they moved into the ballpark in '94, offense has been the big problem. And we talked about Brian McCann. He would certainly be a nice upgraded catcher. There's a first baseman, a Cuban defector, Abreu, that the Rangers certainly will check in on. But for sure, and if they bring back Cruz, that would certainly help. But and they'll have Rios for the whole year. But they're still going to need some improvement, particularly in center field from Martini. I mean, that's gotten a little attention, but Leonis Martini and Craig Gentry as a tandem was basically a pretty subpar offensive production center field situation.
Very good. A lot of things to deal with this year. Again, 91 wins, but yet still a disappointing end for the Texas Rangers. Dick, we appreciate you breaking it down for us as always. It was great to talk to you, and I guess we'll be talking to you as we get ready for spring training.
Okay, well, thanks.
All right.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you, sir. Dic Humphrey for Rattle and Hum Sports. This is a Rattle and Hum Sports podcast. I'm Bryan Houston. Thanks very much for listening. We'll talk to you next time.